Hey everyone, how's it going? Dr. Incompetent here, and let's play some Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. So what I thought I was going to do for this particular episode was create a beginner's guide for how to play a caster in Dungeon Crawl here in 2020 for version 0.25. Now, when I say beginner's guide, let me just make it clear at the beginning. I'm not going to be telling you very basic things about just how to do everything in the game in terms of keyboard commands, how to download and install the game or play it online. It's kind of a guide for people who understand the fundamentals, but maybe are new to playing a caster or haven't played in a while, or you can pick up those pieces of information elsewhere and then jump in. Generally, I will try to explain keyboard activities I'm doing the first time I do them, but for the most part, this is more a guide about the philosophy behind a caster and how to get one off the ground, but not a guide for like you've never played Dungeon Crawl or a game like this before. If you're interested in a guide like that, I do have a newbie guide to Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup on the channel that I would love for you to check out to kind of get the basics and then come into this if you want to play a caster instead of a fighter. All right, everybody. So I say caster guide, and in this guide, we're specifically going to do a type of caster that I think is very conducive to being more just having a lower learning curve for a new player to a caster, and that is an ogre. Okay, so we're going to pick ogre as the species for this, and we're going to go with a venom mage. Okay, so we're going to be an ogre venom mage. This is a caster, and we are using venom magic. There are other types of casters. The great thing about Crawl is that there's many types of casters. There's many different species you could choose, and some of them have better aptitudes with spells. But the reason we're doing the ogre here is because ogres have a lot of hit points, so they're more forgiving than some of the squishier caster species choices. And then Venom Mage is a great spell book that is extremely powerful early on once you get some things online. So I think this will give you a good idea of how to start as a caster, and then if you want to do, a fire elementalist or a wizard or something else, then you can move on to that later. All right, so the first thing we need to do when we jump into the game here is go ahead and push M to bring up the skills, and we're going to then push the slash here, the /, and go ahead and move off of auto training and go to manual, so we can pick what skills that we want to train. If you're in auto, remember the game will just kind of train skills based on what you're doing in the game. When you activate certain skills, it'll turn those on and start training them, and then just everything you're doing, it'll just automatically level it up for you. And it's really not a great thing to ever do unless you just have never played before, and you want to kind of limit your choices and your decision making. But anyway, we're going to turn off dodging. All right, so I'm just pushing the letter corresponding to the skill a couple of times, so it moves off of being a plus and in white text, which means I'm training that, and then turns off of that. So I'm going to also turn off stealth, and I'm going to then only be training spellcasting, transmutation, and poison magic. Okay, the reason I'm doing this is because our spells are our bread and butter. They are what is helping us, all right, to kill enemies. And if we don't have good skills with our spells, we will not be able to cast them reliably, and the power will be low. Spellcasting will turn off pretty soon. What that does is it gives you both magic points, so each bump of spellcasting, every level of it will give you 1 extra magic point, so that's amazing. And then it gives you a 25% increase to the efficacy or the ease of casting spells. It decreases your fail rate, there you go, by 25% for all spells. Whereas if you train the specific school of the spell, like transmutation and poison magic are schools of spells, then if the spell is of that school, you actually get the full benefit of making it easier to cast. So spell casting does that at a 25% rate of the skill level. So let me give you a little bit more demonstration of that. If I push Z, all right, and this will open up our... It's telling the game that we're going to cast a spell. You see in the bottom left in the text box, it says casting Sting, okay, and it says it's safe with a 10% risk of failure. And that's the default spell that it's going to cast for us, and we can push question mark to open up our list of spells. All we have right now is Sting, because that's what we start with. And you can see here, it's gray right now because there's no target for us to cast it on. And it is assigned to the letter A. All right, so if we push Z and then A, then we're going to cast Sting because it's assigned to that. Or we can just click on it with the mouse. And I'm playing online here. Now, its type is transmutation, poison, and that is the spell school like I was talking about. So because we're training both of these, we're going to get better at casting Sting, which means this failure rate will decrease as we skill up. Skills rise with the experience you gain from killing enemies or drinking an experience potion. Now, this means that 10% of the time when we try to cast it, it will fail. And that is bad, but because the failure percentage is in this kind of like grayish color, that means that the effects are not that bad for miscasting it. If it's in red, that means it's terrible. If you try to cast it and you fail, there's seriously bad things that can happen to you. Yellow means slightly less bad, but still pretty bad. So you want to try to bring this down and get it out of those colored categories so that you don't jack yourself with like negative mutations, magical contamination, all of these bad things. And here's the spell level, it's level 1. Now, if you push exclamation point or I, it'll shift this. It'll show you the power of the spell, the range of the spell, how hungry it makes you, and how much noise it makes. Okay, so right now, we're only at 1 out of 4 pips of power because we just started. We're not that great with this spell. We are at max range with the spell right now, and you can see that the range of the Sting is 3. The @ sign is U, and then there is a dash for 2, and then the end of the arrow is the max of the range for 3. And then the hunger is, the lower this is, the better. This means like it's not making me that hungry. It's only 1 pip out of a bunch. And so if this was full, I'd get real hungry if I cast it, but this doesn't make us very hungry. Okay. So now we know we're training our spells and we have the Sting spell. So let's go ahead and get in some fights and get some experience. Just a heads up, I'm starting out as an Ogre Mage, and so this is my starting inventory. I have a robe and a spell book. That's it. All right, so you are quite vulnerable, but because I am an ogre, I have a lot of health. So I have 16 hit points, which is quite good. I also have a high strength, which means later in the game, I can potentially wear some heavier armor. So I'm going to push O to explore, all right? And there's a set of leather armor up there. Now, I cannot wear leather armor because I'm an ogre. I'm so big. So the robe is going to be, mostly what we can wear until we find some dragon scales or something that we can slip into. All right, here's our first enemy. It's a frilled lizard, and he's asleep. Okay, so we can step out of the water and just kind of try to creep up to this guy. Now look, if I were to just push Z and then A, it will quickly flash my range, which you can see is 3, but there's nothing to cast it on, so it's like, hey, there's no susceptible monsters within range. You can use capital Z to cast the spell, even if there's no targets if you wish to, but we don't. So we're going to go up here and walk. Okay, so now the lizard has woken up and he's coming at us. And if we count 1, 2, 3, he is within our range. So we can cast our sting spell right now, which is what we want to do as a caster. We want to nuke things far away so that they don't get up to us and hit us, because you can see here in the upper right, our armor class is 3, our evasion is 10, and we have no shield. So the chances are very good that it hits us. So we need to just kill it. So I'm going to push Z, and then I'm going to push A. And then when you do this, it's going to default target a available target within your range. Right now there's only one for it to choose from, so it's picked this one. But if there's more than one, you can, from this screen, move your spell around with the arrow keys to hit something else. All right, and so I'm just going to keep it here, okay, and it's say aiming to a frilled lizard in the lower left. That's how you know kind of like what you're aiming at. And it's selected. You can see here in the window that shows all the enemies that are on screen that the yellow corners around this mean that he is selected. That's the guy, that's our target. And I'm just going to push enter and cast the spell. The sting hits the frilled lizard. The frilled lizard is poisoned. You kill the frilled lizard. Okay, so sting does both damage when it hits, and it applies poison, which is a dot or a damage over time, as long as the enemy can be poisoned. So we didn't even need to dot the guy. He died instantly. So he's dead. Now, here's what you need to remember as a caster. I only have 3 magic points. Every time you cast a spell, it subtracts magic points equal to the spell level from your MP pool. So that was a first level spell, so it took 1. So I only can cast this spell 2 more times and I'm out. Early game especially, your magic points are going to pretty much dictate everything about what you can handle, and you need to keep an eyeball on that. I rest after like basically every fight to get up to full magic points. I normally do this with all characters to get up to full health, but just as a heads up, I'm at full health, but I'm not at full resources. I need magic points. So I'm going to just push 5 to rest until I get my magic point back. It says you start resting, magic restored, and it stops for us once we've restored our magic and our health is already at full. I'm going to walk over to this guy and I'm just going to butcher him. Now I started to butcher him and this bat came over. So let's just push Z, A, it targets the bat, and we push enter and we blast the bat. Now this bat has been hit, okay, and you can see in the upper right corner on the bat's picture here, his sprite, that there's this green drop, which means he's poisoned. So he's taking damage each turn from poison. I'm going to push Z, A, and cast it again, and the sting misses the bat. This is the thing you have to worry about with the sting spell and many bolt spells, which is that they can be evaded, and bats are high evade enemies. If you, if I were to push X, X is the key you can push to move the cursor around the box and explore the tiles. And then if I push V to examine, you can see right here on the information about the enemy that he's got 3 pips of evade, which means he's very elusive. So he's hard to hit. And if you're new and you don't know about this screen, this card, this information card for each enemy, gives you a whole host of useful bits of data. It gives you an evaluation of how hard the enemy is that you can't always rely on, but is just a nice indicator. It tells you how much damage it can do to you. And it tells you some other pertinent information, like can it see invisibility, or can it see invisible, can it be blinded, how fast is it flying, and then how much health it approximately has, armor class, evasion, and magic resistance. Alright, so it has like 3 health, so we can probably kill it with another casting of our spell. So I'm going to push Z, A, I'm going to target it, and this time we hit it and it got poisoned further and it's dead. Our transmutation skill has gone up to level 1, and you can see we actually also earned another magic point. Okay, so we must have got our spellcasting skill to the point where we get another MP. So instead of getting this stuff, I'm actually going to go back here and push 5 to rest until I get my magic back, and it says it's restored. I'm at 4 of 4. Now I'm going to push O to auto explore. And it's stopped me because there's this rat up here who's been sleeping. Nice thing about Sting as a spell is it says, if you remember, that it's almost silent, so it doesn't wake enemies up because it makes very little noise. So this guy kept snoozing. Let's see if we can get up on him. Yep, so we're already within range of this guy, and we can start casting our spell on him while he's asleep, which is what we will do. Boom. He is dead. Excellent. Now, here's a tip that I want to give you as a quality of life thing as a caster. When you're playing a melee character, and like for example in my tutorial with a human berserker, this is not a necessary step. But if you're playing a character that has an ability that you're using a lot, or a spell that takes multiple keystrokes to get to, Dungeon Crawl does allow you to set a macro. So if you push Shift and apostrophe to get to tilde, it opens up this screen here, and it says macro, macro raw, key map, blah blah boo. We push lowercase m for macro, all right? Then it says input macro trigger key. Now what we're doing is we're just going to assign a key to what we would normally do in terms of several keystrokes to cast a sting spell on the default target. So I'm going to assign this to the number 1. This is what I like to do. You can put it wherever you want. Just be careful not to map your macro over a key that you're going to be using for something else. For example, if you're going to use the number keys, which I do, don't use the number 5 because that's what I like to push to rest. It's up to you. Anyway, I'm pushing the number 1, and then it says the current action for this is Z and then C. Alright, so with another character, I must have had a spell in the C slot that I like to use, and that was my macro. I'm actually going to push R to redefine. If you have no macro, then you just push define, and then it says input macro action. Alright, and I'm going to push Z, which is to open up my spells. A, because the sting spell is assigned to the letter A. And then what I'm going to do, and you have an option here, you can just leave it like this, and this is fine. And then what it'll do is it'll just target the default thing, and then you push enter to confirm that that's the target you want. So this is more useful if, in terms of there being multiple targets, but it does require an extra key press. Now what I like to do is just to add F at the end of this, and then now what this is doing is it's going to cast Sting without needing me to confirm it on the default target. And I push enter, and it says created macro 1 ZAF. So now, if we get to a target, and we just got a scratched golden ring, which is great, like this goblin, okay? I'm just going to push S, and that is wait. The enemy has stepped from here down to here because enemies are super smart. He doesn't charge recklessly into my line of sight. He wants to come up here. And so I'm actually going to step back to this tile so that he comes out here. And then now he is 1, 2, 3 squares away. He's within range of my sting. And I'm going to push 1 to use my macro. Bam. And it shot my sting at him. It missed. I'm going to push it again. And now he's been hit. And he is wounded. And he is poisoned. Now you have a couple of options at this point. One thing you can do is just stand here and cast your sting spell again, which is what I'm going to do. Another thing is he is dotted, so you can just start walking away from this guy and letting him take damage over time as he chases you. As long as the enemy's movement speed is the same as yours, and in this case it is, most enemies it's the same as yours, unless you're a slow background, but Ogre is not slow, moving around. they can't hit you and move. So you can walk away safely without them being able to swing at you, and you kind of kite them effectively with the dot. So for example, if I do step back, he doesn't get to hit me, and he's going to take some damage from this poison. So I'll step back again, and you see that his health bar below him has moved down as the poison has gone into him. But I'm going to go ahead and just shoot him with 1. And boom, I hit him and he dies. So he's dead. Remember, again, I just want to push 5 and rest to get all my magic back before I even auto-explore around. I found a scroll, which is great. If you're a newer player and you're not sure about what to do with scrolls, you push R to bring up your scrolls, and it shows you all your options. I only have 1. Now, here's the deal. I don't like to blind read my scrolls until the level is clear. The reason is I don't know what this scroll is going to do to me. It could do several things to me, some of them good, some of them bad. And so I like to have the entire level explored just so I don't do something bad to myself and there's a whole bunch of enemies that can capitalize or compound that mistake. Like I could torment myself and lose half of my health, or it could be a scroll of noise, or I could teleport myself into a bad situation. So for those reasons, I wait. All right. There's some javelins up here. I'm actually going to pick these up. So I'm going to walk over to the javelins and just push G to grab them. And you can see that they've immediately been quivered in my quiver slot, which is right here. Okay. Oops. All right. And so this means that if I push F, it's going to bring up the throwing screen, and it says, what are you going to throw? Your javelins are quivered, so I'm selecting those, and you can then pick a target. And these are helpful because they have, you can throw things as far as you can see, as far as your line of sight. So it's much longer range than my spell. So it's an option to soften something up before it gets within the range of my sting spell. So I'm going to keep exploring. All right, here's a lizard. And I'm going to walk up to this guy. Hopefully he stays sleeping. He has. I'm going to push 1, and we kill him. And I'm just going to rest. Here's a jackal. He's woken up, so let's just push 1, and he's dead. Here's his buddy. Dogs are usually in packs. Oh, and he got on us real fast, but that's okay. All right, and now we have leveled up to level 2, and I'm going to then kind of move back here and just rest. Now, once you level up with a spellcaster, you'll notice a few things. Number 1, because I'm an ogre, I got 8 more hit points, so I have 24 health. I have a huge health pool, which means I can take a few hits, and that could be all the difference in the world from not dying early with the caster and just getting to have more play experience, which is why I recommend the ogre. I got a magic point when I leveled up, but perhaps the most important thing is if I push Shift M, this brings up all of the spells that I have the opportunity to memorize. When you start as a casting background, you get a spell book, and within that spell book, there are different spells of increasing level that you memorize. Now you start as a caster with the, I believe it's the Young Poisoner's Handbook is the title of it, and you get Poisonous Vapors, Ignite Poison, Mephitic Cloud, and Ogre's Toxic Radiance. They're levels 2, 3, and 4. Poisonous Vapors is our second level spell, and because we're second level, we can memorize it. You cannot memorize a spell unless your experience level is equal to or greater than the spell level. Right here in green, it says I have 5 spell levels left, which means, that I can memorize, for example, Poisonous Vapors because it's 2, and then Ignite Poison because it's 3, and I would use all my spell levels. Now I can't memorize Ignite Poison because I'm not 3rd level, but I have 5 levels to choose from out of these in my spell book. I'm going to learn Poisonous Vapors right now. It's from the Poison School and the Air School, and I currently would have a 16% rate of failure to cast this. And when you click on it, it says memorize poisonous vapors, consuming 2 spell levels and leaving 3, and you just push capital Y to confirm that, and now it's assigned to B. Okay, so what I'm going to immediately do is just push Shift tilde and make a new macro, pushing M, and I'm going to assign it to number 2, and it there was nothing defined there, so it says input macro action. So you actually don't need to tell it to define it. You just push, and I'm going to push Z, B, because as you can see, the spell was assigned to letter B. The spells will just be assigned to letters going down the alphabet as you get new ones, but things can get messed up over time if you use scrolls of amnesia and things like that. But anyway, this is spell B, and then I'm going to push F and enter, and now I have a macro to cast Poisonous Vapors. Poisonous Vapors is your complete ass kicker of a spell. It's the reason that Venom Mage is so strong. To be honest, if you look at the spell book, all of these spells are good. You will memorize and use the crap out of all of these spells in certain situations because they're extremely helpful. And in subsequent videos, we will get into when to use these spells, why they're helpful, and what problems they help you solve in the dungeon. The reason that Poisonous Vapors is so good is because it's a smite targeted spell. What does that mean? Smite is an ability that some enemies have, most notably early game Orcish priests. And what it means is it's an ability that can damage you from range, and it does not need a line of fire. All it needs is line of sight. So there could be enemies blocking you. A tree could be blocking you. Something that doesn't block line of sight, like a plant, I suppose. And as long as there is line of sight to that enemy, you can cast it, and you don't need a clear projectile path, clear line of fire. Additionally, it cannot miss. It does not need to roll to hit or to be evaded like Sting does. So you're talking about nearly 100% accuracy. There are some extreme cases with Poisonous Vapors where an enemy might be super fast and it doesn't work, but for the most part, it's going to hit every time. And so it's way longer range and it's way higher accuracy, so it is a very, very strong spell indeed. Now, one thing to be aware of, though, is unlike Sting, it does no initial damage on its own. It just applies poison. All right? So you're putting dots, but you're not doing, like, upfront damage. So right here, I'm just going to use Sting. The reason I'm going to back off of this Jackal and just let him get poisoned. He died from the poison, and now his buddy is poisoned. The reason I'm backing off and letting him die is because he actually started to hit me, so let's just let him go. The main reason I'm using Sting here is because while Poisonous Vapors is very, very good, I have a 16% fail rate with it, which is, not great. Additionally, but it is gray, so the penalty is not that bad. I'm still at 9% with my Sting. Additionally, Poisonous Vapors cost 2 magic points each because it's a second level spell. Remember, spells cost equivalent to their spell level. So I can only cast that twice, whereas Sting, I can cast 5 times before I run out of magic. So until I get more effective at casting it, I'm not going to. Now, I do want to point out that this guy has 2 green drops, which means that he is like super poisoned. If you go X and then go V, you can get a description on the enemy. Oh, no, that's not the way you do it. You just push, I'm sorry. That screen doesn't show it. You just push X, and then you don't actually have to push V to examine. You just mouse over them, or you put the cursor over them, and you see in the lower left it says the Jackal is heavily wounded in yellow, and the color coding describes how damaged. If it's red, they're even more damaged. And then it says he's very poisoned, unlike before where he's just, less severely poisoned. So this guy, I have no magic, but it's okay. I can just walk backward and he's going to die over time to the poison. Boom, he's dead. All right. So everyone, I think this is a great place to stop this episode. We will pick up with this character in subsequent episodes to this guide, this beginner's guide for a caster. But this gets us to level 2. It gets us our next spell and shows you the very, very beginning ropes with this character. I hope you guys found this informative and useful. If you enjoyed this, if you got good info out of this, could you please subscribe to the channel? I'd really appreciate it if you haven't done so already. Also, any questions that you have about the game or this build, put those in the comments below. I would love to respond and help you guys out in terms of understanding and enjoying this game, because it's such an excellent, deep, rewarding, free game that is different every time and provides an extreme level of satisfaction. You just have to get past that entry barrier and get into it. And hopefully this video is putting you on the path to doing that. All right, everyone. I hope you have an excellent evening or day. Thanks again for watching, and I'll check you guys in the next one. Take care.